Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast here at the Texan. I just spoke with Representative Matt Krause, and we spoke about his Chick-fil-A bill, his lemonade stand bill. We even had some fun with his family's tradition of March Madness. So I hope that you'll enjoy listening to it. Then after you've listened to the podcast, if you could go to the Texan.news, where we've got so many articles on so many issues, I think that you'll find very interesting. And after you've read some of those free articles, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe so you can be a part of everything that the Texan has to offer. Thanks again for coming here today, and we appreciate it very much. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about what y'all are doing and honored to be here with you today.
Thank you very much. Honored to have you here. So Representative Matt Krause represents House District 93 in the Texas House, which encompasses a portion of Tarrant County in suburban Fort Worth, Arlington. Kind of describe the district, if you will.
That's right. It's kind of an L shape in Tarrant County. It kind of goes down 35 from north to south till you get to I-30, and then it juts east along Tarrant County into Arlington to the Dallas County line. So it's an interesting drawn district, but I love it. It's beautiful.
Awesome. I just pointed to my operations director because she said it was a bow tie, and I said I did see it more as an L. Anyway, I won that argument just now, so I appreciate that.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. Our listeners out there, there's going to be a lot of them that don't know you because you represent a specific part of Texas, and we've got listeners all over Texas. So tell us about where you were born, what your day job is. I hope most people know by now, the Texas legislature is supposed to be a part-time position. Right. We see it's generally more than that. But anyway, tell us what you do to actually make money and where you were born. My wife would love to know that question too.
I don't know if we can answer that one today, but yeah, I'm a fourth-generation Texan, and I was born in Tyler. My dad was a pastor. Both my grandfathers were pastors. My great-grandfather was a pastor. My brother's a pastor. A couple uncles are pastors, and a couple cousins are pastors, and I'm a lawyer and a politician. So I'm like the real black sheep of the family. Yeah. But so I was born in Tyler.
Saying, what happened to Matt?
That's right. Everybody's got to have one in their family. But so I was born in Tyler, but moved quickly after that to San Antonio, where my dad got a church. And so I grew up in San Antonio, went out to San Diego for college, went out to Virginia for law school, and then came back to Fort Worth in 2007 to practice constitutional law. Ran the Texas office for a public interest law firm that focused on First Amendment advocacy. Ran for the House in 2010, lost. They redrew the lines to that beautiful L-shaped district we were talking about earlier. Ran in 2012, won, and now I'm in the midst of my fourth session here. So met my wife in college. She was from Alaska, met in California. We have 5 beautiful kids now, and in my day job, I do mostly business development for a community bank, Vista Bank. Oh. And so that's kind of my day job. I don't even think I realized
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So really enjoy it. Great group, great team, and that's what I do to quote unquote make money. Although again, the jury's still out on that. So
exactly. Yeah. So Jenny, your wife, and you have 5 kids.
That's right.
You can field your own basketball team at the Krause house.
That's right. We both played college basketball, so that was important to us to have that starting 5. But as you know, I married way up.
Yes,
they say
you
kicked
did.
Your coverage big time, and I just have so much respect for her to do what she does so I can do what I do down in Austin.
Absolutely.
It's, as you know, it's a demanding job, time away from your family, especially during that 140 days. And without her and her support, I couldn't do it. So
absolutely. Well, let's get back to the basketball team that you have. Yeah. I notice on social media that every year you do a little March Madness.
We do.
with your kids.
The Krause
Tell
House
us a little bit
Challenge.
About that. It's kind of become something with your family and on social media, that kind of thing. How did that develop, and who seems to have won that competition the most, if anybody?
Yeah, there's only one consistent theme, is that who hasn't won, and that's me. But And but
I swear that's not why I brought it up.
No, but it's funny because I probably follow it closer than anybody else. But like I said, Jenny and I both played college basketball, so we've always gotten into March Madness, and we wanted the kids to feel that excitement, so we'd always watch it with them. And a couple of years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, we started the bracket, letting our kids fill out a bracket. I never picked for them. Our 2-year-old filled out her own bracket this year. I don't know whether she liked the mascot sounding better, if it was the team that was above her, whatever it was. But we let them fill out their own brackets. And even a couple years ago, my daughter Hannah Sue, I think she was 4 at the time, she kept saying UConn. And I said, UConn's a 7th seed. A 7th seed has never won. She's like, UConn. And they ended up winning it that year. And so it's been uncanny. My 4-year-old won it. Hannah Sue's won it. Our 2 boys have won it. Jenny's won it. And I'm still the one who has not won it. So
that's terrible.
But it's been so much fun to see them get hooked on something like that too. We all watch the games together, and they get really into it. So it's just a fun family thing for us to do.
That's awesome. It's kind of like when the first time a person goes to bets on a horse at the horse track, say for instance, and because the horse is pretty, right? That's
right. Or you like the name. Or, that's exactly right. There's no rhyme or reason, but sometimes it just works out like that.
That's awesome. Well, that's great. All right, so let's get back to politics. What formed your political perspective? Where did that come from for you?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think for a while it obviously grows up with your parents' influence, and just by virtue of being pastors and in the ministry, everything kind of came back to, what does your belief system say about this issue or that issue? I remember I think it was in 8th grade, I had something in our church bulletin about how abortion killed children. That shouldn't be allowed to happen, and so everything kind of came back to what does your belief system say about these issues? And then as I got into college and started feeling like maybe I should, go to law school, maybe I should look at the political arena, I started reading people like Hayek, like Bastiat, some of those people who...
You're whispering sweet nothings into my ear, Representative.
And so, you start reading those guys and that kind of starts forming your political philosophy too, because you kind of see what history has done. If you don't learn the lessons from the past, you're doomed to repeat them in the future. And so we see what some of these policies that people are championing even today, socialism and other things, how they failed time and time again, and how humanity has flourished and prospered under certain circumstances and certain systems. And so as I read more and learned more about history and what worked, and especially our founding fathers always had a passion for the founding, the Declaration, the Constitution, reading about what made that so special and what's allowed that to flourish for 240 years now, that kind of said, okay, that system worked. We're conservatives. So a lot of times there's a knee-jerk to upheave things, and that's not conservative. You want to make sure there's lessons to be learned from the past. You discard the ones that failed, but you keep the ones that have worked and improve upon that. And that's what kind of started forming that political philosophy. Just
to get off a little bit, based on what you were saying with, socialism and those kinds of things, why do you think it is right now, particularly as we watch elections and candidates appear, I think particularly at the presidential level, why do you think it is that socialism seems to be sneaking back into people's psyche and want to go that direction? Do you have any?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially when we have the real life scenario of Venezuela playing out right in front of us. It seems like you could point to that. Now the other side comes back and says, well, we're talking about a benign socialism. We're not talking about a socialism like that. But Hayek in his Road to Serfdom said, and anytime you have these central planners, this socialistic society, even if it starts off good, you're going to have people who come in who have to make the hard decisions. You get this, you don't get this, you get this, you don't get this. And that's when it kind of morphs into something that's a little more sinister. And so I think people have this idealistic idea. Jonah Goldberg, I'm sure you've read him, and
yes.
National Review, he always talks about utopia. People trying to get to utopia, and the definition of utopia is it's nothing. There is no utopia, and they think socialism will bring it there. And I think you've seen abuses in the free enterprise system and in capitalism, that crony capitalism that you were so big in championing against when in your time in the Senate, that you've kind of perverted the system. So people see capitalism as that and free enterprise as that. And so you're saying, well, that's not working, so we got to go to a different system, when what we really need to do is clean up the free enterprise system, because it's allowed humanity to flourish more than anything else in our in human history.
So based on all that you told us about, what formed your perspective on politics, but then what made you actually decide to run for office, right? I mean, you can have perspective on politics, you can be an activist, you can be vaguely involved, just go to and vote. What made you make that extra step to actually want to run for office?
Yeah, it was 2008, and Barack Obama was on the scene, and he said, I want to fundamentally transform this country. And I always say, if I told my wife I want to fundamentally transform her, I would be on the couch for a month, right? Because if you want to fundamentally transform, or a little longer, or there might not be any couch for me to come home to. If you want to fundamentally transform something, it means you don't love what's already there, or you don't appreciate what's already there. And I happen to love the foundation foundation the founding fathers built our constitutional republic on. And so I thought at that time we had 2 kids, and I said, you know what? I've got to make a difference if we don't want to lose this country. I don't want to see it fundamentally transformed. So I started looking at maybe running for Congress, and then through a lot of discussions with mutual friends of ours, thought maybe that's not the right place to look. I looked at the state rep race in 2010 and felt like there were some differences between me and the incumbent, and I felt like, you know what, I got to get involved. So we just started knocking on doors, knocked on 7,000 doors, just started telling people our vision for what we felt like the state of Texas needed. And that's what I love about this country. You don't have to be a part of a certain family. You don't have to have wealth. You don't have to have a certain pedigree to run for office. If you're passionate about it, you can do it. And so we just got in and we did it. It was all because we wanted to make sure Texas and America stayed the great state and country that it's been for so long.
Awesome. So from there, deciding to run, winning, you're on your 4th term.
4th term.
Now.
Hard to believe.
Yeah. So you've obviously now been in the House under 2 different speakers.
That's right.
So how would you compare this session? I'm not necessarily talking about the individual speakers themselves.
That's
maybe.
right.
I'm just talking about how the House functions. How do you see that? What differences do you see? Is it better, worse? What's your perspective on that?
From my vantage point, the House has functioned a lot more efficiently and effectively this session than the prior 3. And there's been, I voted against the speaker in 2015, so you can't expect a lot of good treatment necessarily on that. But I feel like no matter who you are in the House, whether you're the furthest right or the furthest left, you're able to have a voice in the House, and you're able to
this session
you're able to vouch for your district. That didn't always happen. There was good lists, there was bad lists. You weren't able to get any bills passed because you were in the Freedom Caucus or one of the 19 that voted against the speaker, and so that kind of stifled the ability to be effective for your district. I haven't seen any of that this session, which has been really good. Even people who opposed Speaker Bonin at the outset have still been able to get some things done this session. And there was a big discussion on the property tax penny swap with the sales tax.
Yes.
And in past sessions, at least from my vantage point, it seems like this is what we're doing. This is how we're going. I had multiple conversations with the speaker, with the speaker's team and others, and they really wanted to know what my input was. They weren't saying, we're doing this, you need to get on the team. They're like, okay, what are your concerns? And I felt like they were like that with everybody. It wasn't a top-down approach. They genuinely wanted to hear what we had to say. And in the end, we didn't end up doing it because I don't think there was a consensus necessarily in the House and the Senate, but the House was able to have a very productive, real conversation on it, and I very much appreciated that.
So I didn't clarify enough before I asked you that question. So for the listeners out there, it was Speaker...
Joe Strauss.
Sorry, all of a sudden I went blank. Speaker Strauss before Speaker Bonin, and it's just this session that they have a new speaker, which is Speaker Bonin. And you mentioned briefly, for those people out there that don't really know the ins and outs behind the scenes, they may not have understood what you said when you said, I voted against the speaker. Because first of all, the speaker is voted on by the body, by the House of Representatives. Unlike the lieutenant governor, which oversees the Senate, that's voted on by voters, Texans, at the ballot box. But you mentioned that you voted against the speaker, which would have been Strauss, and you kind of made a little voice like that because. So for people out there that may not know, you can get punished. You get punished
Sure.
Inside the body for not voting for the speaker, not doing as the speaker wants. That always depends on the particular speaker, right? Because I've heard too in history, about certain speakers that ruled with an iron, fist,
who were conservative. So I mean,
right. So it doesn't necessarily. It's not even about Democrat or Republican. It's about that particular person.
That's right.
And the way they want to lead. And so you're saying, it really cost you to vote against the speaker when it was Strauss.
Sure.
And didn't get a lot of legislation move forward.
That's right. And now, to be fair, on the other side, there's only so many chairmanships and so many committee assignments you can dole out. So if somebody voted against you, it makes it a little harder. But that shouldn't shut you out from being able to promote legislation and get legislation through if it's a good idea, you're working respectfully with the body and other things.
And you're there to represent your district.
Right.
I mean, those people, constituents of
That's right.
yours deserve that representation. So
That's right.
I know from that perspective, I'm speaking totally from the perspective of a constituent, you certainly don't want just one person in the legislature not to have your voice heard, right?
That's exactly right. And so, and again, as you know, there's a different definition of effective as well.
Right.
And so some people say you're not being effective, but I think the Freedom Caucus showed last session, even if you're not getting bills pushed through the legislature, if you're not getting legislature with your name on it, you can still be effective in shaping, informing, killing, and promoting legislation. So just because you're not, and we should all agree that it doesn't matter if your name's on the bill or not. If it's good policy, we want to see it get done. And so from that perspective, no matter what happens or what kind of politics are being played within the chamber, as long as you're working to affect good policy for Texas, that's something you can be proud of and go home to your constituents with.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the Freedom Caucus. How has that changed? I mean, what's the Freedom Caucus like this session versus last session? Again, under two different speakers. Is it very different?
The dynamic has changed dramatically. And I think some people would say for the good, some people would say for the bad, to be honest with you. Last session, it was very much kind of an opposition group. And because you weren't having your voice heard, didn't feel like the grassroots were having their voice even included in any of the discussions going on at the leadership tables, the chairman lunches, and things like that. And so that was kind of the role for the Freedom Caucus. This session, again, I think it's a credit to the speaker and his team. The chairman of the Freedom Caucus, Mike Lang, has been involved in pretty much every conversation that's been going on. Matt Schaefer's had the ability to weigh in on a lot of important policy matters. So, and you want to give the new speaker and new administration the benefit of the doubt or a chance to, to prove themselves to allow that. And I think the speaker and his team have done a good job of allowing all the voices to be heard. And so it's kind of changed from more of an opposition to, okay, how can we help craft and mold policy through the conduit of the Republican caucus or other things. There's still been things we've pushed back on that people probably never hear about or see, and that's okay. But we're still doing what we can to be the voice of the grassroots down in Austin, but the way you're going about it has been a little different. And I think they've both been effective, but different administrations call for different approaches, and I think that's what you've seen with the Freedom Caucus this session.
If you'd like to hear more of my conversation with Representative Matt Krause, visit thetexan.news/Krause. That's thetexan.news/KRAUSE. There, we talk about the legislation he introduced this session to protect the ability of kids to run lemonade stands and his bill to protect the First Amendment rights of Chick-fil-A. We also talk about the fun that was had when NBA player Dirk Nowitzki visited the Capitol. Thank you so much for listening.